everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Virtual Island Summit. Thanks so much for joining this session. My name is Michaela Johnson, and I am the Business Development Associate at Island Innovation. I'm based in the Caribbean, the beautiful Twin Island states of Trinidad and Tobago, to be exact. As many of you may know, Island Innovation is a sustainable development consultancy primarily focusing on islands. We have a wide range of services, including island development strategies, impact program design and coordination, capacity building, events, strategic communications, and government affairs. We are trusted by clients around the globe, and if you're interested in learning more about the work that we do, you can reach out to us using the contact information that will be made available in the chat. I am very happy to be presenting this session today titled After the Impact, Preparing, Responding, and Recovering from Disasters on Islands. Before we begin, now you should see a poll up here on your screen. Please let us know your gender, where you are connecting from, and what industry and sector you belong to. And of course, let us know in the chat where you are joining us from. I see we have people from the UK, from Scotland, Somalia, Martinique, Prince Edward Island. We have a wide range of persons joining us globally, and I think that really represents what we do here at Island Innovation and what the Virtual Island Summit aims to achieve. As we know, island communities face particular challenges when it comes to disasters and extreme weather events. The impacts can be devastating, from hurricanes and tsunamis to floods and volcanic eruptions. This session dives deeper into the specific vulnerabilities of islands and how to effectively prepare for, respond to, and of course, recover from disasters. I invite you to please make use of the chat, introduce yourself, and let us know where you're joining from if you haven't already. And of course, make any comments during this session. And please make sure that you use the Q&A function for any questions you might have for our panelists, and we will do our best to make sure that we can address as many of them as possible when we get to that Q&A part of this session. All right, so I think at this time we can take a look at the result for poll. We have a wide range of persons joining us today, mostly coming from Europe and the Caribbean. We have a large representation from North America and South and Central America, Africa, and the Indian Ocean. We also have a lot of persons joining us from the private sector, and specifically that environmental services and ocean conservation. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. At this time, I will hand you over to our moderator, Dr. Ilan Kelman, Professor for Disasters and Health at the Department of Risk and Disaster Reduction at the University College London. Ilan?
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. And thank you to Island Innovation for making this possible, as well as to our panelists and to all of you. The key for this session is very much in the title. You notice that the phrase used is disasters. It does not say natural disasters, because for over 4 decades, disaster specialists have explained the phrase natural disaster should not be used. The disaster is not the hurricane, not the earthquake, not the tornado, not the landslide, not the tsunami, not the avalanche. The disaster is because these natural phenomena occur and hurt us when we know they could hurt us, and yet we do nothing about it. So they really are just disasters. If people were not poor, or were not marginalized, had the resources, had the information, had the knowledge, had the political power, it would just be an earthquake or a cyclone. There would not be deaths, damage, disruption, and destruction. So the key is very much no natural disasters. And there is actually a website, nonaturaldisasters.com, which explains why and how we can change the mindset, including the hashtag #NoNaturalDisasters. Similarly, being an academic, of course, I've written a book, and it describes the choices which we make and do not make in order to create or not create disasters. So it's up to us, as we're going to hear from our experts, regarding what we can and should be doing in order to stop disasters. And so for islands, we hear so much about, oh, these poor small, tiny, under-resourced, vulnerable, inherently vulnerable islands and islanders. That is so patronizing, so unfair, and so fake. Islanders have taught the world so much about what we can and should do to ensure that these natural phenomena do not become disasters. I have learned so much from just watching, reading, listening, and understanding what is out there from the islanders to show us their wonderful knowledges, resources, ideas, experiences, and wisdoms, so that disasters do not have to happen. Thank you for joining, and I'm delighted to moderate here in order to now say that even when we have to address human-caused climate change impacts, it is very much up to us to stop disasters, not taking vulnerability as inevitable or inherent, not taking disasters as something that must happen, and not succumbing to the doom of human-caused climate change when there is so much inspiration, action that we should take into account and that we are going to learn about today. So thank you, and I'm delighted to turn it over to our first speaker, Camila Tapias, who from Spin Global. Camila.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elan, and I'm very honored to be here with you all today on the 6th annual Virtual Island Summit. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. No problem at all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Alrighty, thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Camila Tapias. I'm a global disaster resilience specialist at Spin Global. We're a Maryland-based in the U.S. Public benefit company, and our mission is to disrupt disasters from neighbor destinations. And I also serve as a global board member for RISE under the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. So my presentation will be focused on resilience of islands in the age of disruption. So let's just dive in here. I want to focus on some of the islands' unique challenges. And, let me be clear, I know these are not all of the challenges, but the ones that I want to focus on, these are also, opportunities for success and growth. And as Dr. Elan was saying, the type of resilience that islanders have shown us, some of them starting with climate change impacts. As we know, the frequency and intensity of natural hazards continues to rise, such as stronger storms, rising sea levels, and coral reef degradation continue to put our islands on the front lines of climate risk. Economic vulnerability, such as small population sizes, our islands' remoteness, and also the high transportation costs, which make islands more susceptible to economic shocks. I mean, we've seen it. We saw it through the COVID-19 pandemic, the supply chains being disrupted, now geopolitical situations, war, et cetera, different factors, show the ripple effects and the interconnectedness across sectors. And then here are biodiversity and livelihood. For many small islands, developing state SIDS, tourism and fisheries represent over half of their GDP. So biodiversity also provides this natural protection against multiple climate impacts. Here are some interesting facts that I wanted to share today. The first one, did you know that 20% of the world's biodiversity is found on islands, making them, as I think most of us know here, unique hubs for our ecosystems and also for the conservation of our species. The second one is that SIDS contribute less than 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions, yet they're highly vulnerable to climate change and different hazards. And, we'll continue to talk about that today with some of our other panelists. And then this third point, in terms of our early warning systems, we know that they can save lives, but only 1/3 of SIDS have multi-hazard early warning systems. And this particularly, and connected to also the work that I'm involved with in the UN, is that the UN Secretary General has called for every person on Earth, and this is called the Early Warning Systems for All initiative, that every person on Earth should be protected by early warning systems by 2027. So of all disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation measures, early warning systems stand as one of the best proven and also cost-effective methods for reducing disaster deaths and losses. And it's also a partnership with the World Meteorological Organization, which will have a representative here in our session as well later on. I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals and island resilience. In particular, the SDGs provide this roadmap for improving island resilience through integrated solutions that address not only environmental, social, and economic vulnerabilities. And islands must adopt and continue to adopt holistic cross-sectoral approaches to sustainable development that align with these goals and enhance their capacity and continue to improve their resilience to prepare, respond to, and recover from human-made and natural hazards. And as we see here on this slide, there are 17 goals and there are 135 targets. And I actually encourage you all to, if you haven't already, to read the 2024 progress report that the UN published, and actually has really interesting and alarming numbers as well. And this year report reveals that only 17% of these SDGs are on track to be achieved. But multiple reasons of why, not only the pandemic and a lot of other factors, global factors that have impacted this. So I encourage you to read that because it provides really interesting insights. Moving on here, when we talk about, and something that we do a lot in my company at Spain Global, public-private partnerships and private-public partnerships. And you'd see here, I put private first intentionally because a lot of the emphasis sometimes is put on, the public sector leading a lot of initiatives, funding a lot of projects, but we know that the government alone cannot do it, and we can continue to work in silos. So there is a need to have more private sector-led initiatives to increase resilience and also have more disaster risk reduction in our islands, in our communities. For example, financing more climate resilient infrastructure and renewable energy and disaster resilient buildings can really help our islands withstand extreme weather. Economic diversification, for example, funding sectors like ecotourism and sustainable fisheries. Private equity, for example, can reduce that dependence on vulnerable industries and that over-dependence like tourism. Supporting innovation, investments in water management, renewable energy, and also digital infrastructure can enhance our island's resilience. And this last point, and this is something that I'm really passionate about and really continue to talk about, is how can we make resilience an investable target? There is an opportunity for impact. Resilience projects offer not only significant social and environmental benefits, but also potential financial returns through stable investments in infrastructure and sustainability. So with that being said, my last point here, my last slide that I want to talk about, these are a few strategies for consideration in terms of island resilience, is that investing in resilient infrastructure and stormwater management is going to be crucial. And in my company at Spain Global, we have a mechanism called the Spain Global Community Disaster Resilience Fund, where we facilitate investment of private capital to our public benefit projects that reduce exposure of vulnerability to disasters and also increase economic opportunity for underserved and historically marginalized populations. So we're looking to make investments of a minimum $100 million up to $50 billion. And I'll leave my contact as well. Love to stay in touch and send more information for those of you who may be interested in learning more about the application process and the type of how to get funded. The second point is early warning systems. As I mentioned, this is a very good initiative and very ambitious as well, that needs a whole society, whole community approach to be achieved. Real-time alerts and multi-language communications for this multi-hazard alerts to ensure the safety during our disasters. And the last point, community training and governance. Really focus on empowering our communities, having community ownership, having this whole community approach with preparedness training and strengthening governance frameworks to enhance resilience. So really having policies at the forefront and planning before to ensure that we have this change of a culture shift and a cultural preparedness to improve resilience in our island. So I look forward to a discussion, and this is my information here. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn. This is my email, and look forward to the conversation. Back to you, Elon.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Camila, for giving that overview, but also very much ways forward. Now we welcome our second speaker, Alexandra Sutzer from the Climate Action Center of Excellence. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ilan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. It is a privilege to be here with you today at the 6th Virtual Island Summit. I'm Alexandra Sutzer, Director of the Climate Action Center of Excellence, speaking to you from Doha, Qatar. Our center was launched at COP28 by the Gulf Organization for Research and Development, and it aims to gather a substantial group of participating countries in this nationally determined contribution cycle until 2030 to generate a significant volume of greenhouse gas emission reductions. And we do this through knowledge sharing and targeted technical assistance. So, as we all know, SIDS are on the front lines of the climate crisis, facing existential threats from rising sea levels, increasingly intense storms, and other climate-related disasters. And the need for urgent climate action to support SIDS has never been more important, more pressing. The power systems I will talk about today are just one piece of the broader resilient puzzle that SIDS must solve. So I will talk about power systems for resilient supply of electricity to allow for a quicker recovery after disasters. Our lives depend on reliable access to electricity, and people who prepare infrastructure to withstand disasters must build resilient power systems, because power outages after disasters have far-reaching impacts. They interrupt communication systems, but also hospital and healthcare functions, and they have therefore a cascading effect throughout communities. So a technology solution that is increasingly at the forefront in discussions is the so-called swarm grid. And swarm grids address the complexity of off-grid situations and can be well applied in disaster relief, but also in regular off-grid situations, of course. So swarm grids are an emerging approach to electrification in the global south. The evolutionary approach builds on the idea of not building a static system, but a system which can grow with the customer's electricity demand. The swarm grid can not only grow from a single solar home system to a village-based microgrid, but extend to other villages through a bottom-up approach from households to regional and even countrywide energy networks. And in order to further improve the energy reliability, the swarm grids can combine different renewable energy sources such as solar, hydro, and wind. A swarm grid is also stronger and more reliable because of each component of the swarm of the grid and of the system. So each component, each cube within the grid is independent, is an independent system. And if one or more of these cubes or systems have lowered performance or fail, for example, during a disaster or after a disaster, another element of this swarm will immediately compensate and supply electricity. And these systems can create renewable energy powered microgrids to support disaster relief efforts, or as I already mentioned, regularly power a village, a hospital, or a clinic. These systems can also be put in place as backup power systems in locations where public grids are unreliable or unstable, and where a constant and stable supply of electricity is crucial. So in my role as climate technical advisor with UNDP, in the past, I supported the installation of a swarm grid with a unique technology in Vanuatu, as sits in the Pacific. Vanuatu is ranked as the most at-risk country to extreme natural hazards by the World Bank, by the World Risk Report, making it very critical that energy supply is robust and can be reliable in the face of extreme weather. In centralized grids, as already mentioned, if one critical component fails, the whole grid is taken down, often for weeks. And those systems are centralized with a master control unit that builds the voltage and maintains proper frequency across the entire structure. If the controller fails, the entire system goes down, and in locations that are regularly disrupted by extreme weather, this is, of course, far from reliable. And therefore, we introduced the swarm technology as a pilot project in Lelepa Island, which is next to Efate Island, where Vanuatu's capital, Port Vila, is located. The swarm technology is that we applied is a self-learning and self-configuring system, and regulates power production, storage, and distribution within the swarm through artificial intelligence. And while this was a pilot project on a very small island, the Vanuatu government has plans to extend it to more of the country's off-grid islands. To establish this modular swarm system, we used a technology called power blocks that allows building a highly fail-safe grid without major engineering. The algorithms of this technology that makes the technology different from other battery systems allows for the standalone energy cubes that house high-end batteries to be stacked together and plugged together, and these systems then automatically configure as a mini-grid. With a completely decentralized architecture and no central control, additional units can be very easily added, and added also as power requirements increase. A larger system with greater capacity can be created by adding these units and really simply stacking them together like Lego blocks, and create these larger units and actually almost unlimited sizes. So this modularity enables users to rapidly deploy also backup capacity in the event of disasters without the need for any additional engineering calculations or manual. And these cubes can then provide the necessary security and stability during emergencies. In Lelepa, we installed the whole system in a few days for less than 1/3 of the costs of conventional solar power mini-grids. And since it is built as an expandable swarm grid or swarm system, future expansion can be done based on the increasing power need of the community. So in this project, I really witnessed the astonishment of the community on Lelepa Island after the pilot installations were completed. And it quickly became clear to me that we were here really on the right track with this technology, because the cubes are technically so easy to handle, and no lengthy training was needed. A local technician, not specific energy related, a technician on Lelepa Island, Brownie Billy, confirmed this after the installation, and he mentioned that these power cubes are as simple as a breeze. So this was really very encouraging and confirmed and reconfirmed that the technology makes sense in this context. So such innovation is really needed in the face of climate change, with more disasters occurring. So we need technology solutions that are quickly implementable in emergency situations, but also sustain power supply in rural and also low-income communities. We saw that such solutions did not overburden the community, and allowed the community to create new income-generating activities, new livelihoods within their own safe social structures at their own pace. And with a growing challenge of climate change, particularly in cities, innovative and such resilient power systems like swarm grids offer a promising path forward. By investing in these technologies and supporting cities in their adoption, we can help build really a more resilient and sustainable future for island communities worldwide. So thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Super to hear about
Was
technology.
it too long? Sorry.
and absolutely using the best that technology has available. Also wonderful to see these questions in the Q&A. Please do keep them coming, and then we will be able to have the panelists interact. But for now, delighted to present our third panelist, Priscilla Irana from the Indian Ocean Islands Foundation.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. When it comes to talking about resilience on island communities, I'm taking more of a case study approach in our particular case. I come from the Republic of Mauritius, and we've been one of the unfortunate few to face two very much non-natural disasters in recent times. So when we talk about vulnerability, one aspect that is key is one, island communities are not a monolith. Within islands, you have people with varying degrees of vulnerability or risk exposure to events and how they are able to deal with these events. That degree of vulnerability is dependent on what drives the vulnerability and what are the stresses from the system affecting them. So I'm assuming everybody can see my slides, though probably it's not on. There we go. Now it's on full screen. Talking about the processes and the interrelationships between those processes. So when Mauritius faced the pandemic and associated lockdowns, there were quite immediate effects on how people were getting their food, because about 75% of Mauritian food relies on imports. So in the first table on the slide, you can see that we had a decline in the number of aircrafts landing, so affecting imports, the number of freight coming into the country, the number of goods that we were able to load up that would go for export. And in parallel to that, there were quite significant changes, increases in the rate of unemployment, both for men and women, surprisingly much higher for men. Now, take that into account, that's at national level. And now let's look at a particularly favorite area of the country, the southeast of Mauritius. It's a region that is historically very rich, biologically very rich, and also culturally very rich. At the same time, it's a region that showcases vast disparities between communities that live in fairly impoverished conditions versus communities and people that are large landowners with far more economic means. So, for example, we are looking, if I can move my slide, there we go. We're looking at existing socioeconomic vulnerabilities in terms of the poverty rate for all the village council areas. It's just an administrative unit we call villages in that region of the country. It's the region where the villages show the highest level of poverty rate compared to the entire country. So that's quite saying something. Now, on top of having been affected by the pandemic, Mauritius faced an oil spill in 2020, bang in the middle of the pandemic. So what that led to is almost a vicious cycle of exposure to environmental and economic crises because of the pandemic and because of the oil spill, affecting coastal communities of the Southeast that are, on one hand, very dependent on the environment and living in close interconnection with the environment, be it the coastal zone, the lagoon, because they are fishermen, they are women who glean for subsistence, or they are tourism operators. So whatever vulnerability they already had, pre-existing because of their socioeconomic condition were worsened by being exposed to the environmental crisis happening during a pandemic period. Now, in 2020 as well, my team led a research project conducting a socioeconomic environmental impact assessment on communities within that region. And we compared data from spill-affected sites in the region to other areas of the country that were not affected by the spill. What we found is pretty stark. Within the spill-affected areas, about 50% of the working population, most of them work in the informal sector, so they are not full-time employees, they're more seasonal based. Days they work, or they may have multiple small jobs. They are paid in cash. It's not always a guaranteed job. Their household earnings declined by a significant margin. Even then, after pandemic lockdowns were over and people were able to go back to work, the recovery, economic recovery for households in areas that were affected by the oil spill was much more difficult than for those not affected by the oil spill. So clearly there's been that vicious cycle happening for them and is something that is likely to happen again. Mauritius is in a key position of the Indian Ocean. There are multiple shipping routes crossing all over. It's not for nothing that Mauritius is called the star and key of the Indian Ocean. And I am one of those thinking that the pandemic we had is very unlikely to be the only one that we get to know in this lifetime. So adding to that pressures of hurricanes becoming stronger, potentially more frequent over time, there are multiple crises that are likely to affect at-risk communities, and they need support to raise their capacity to sustain those risks. So this is where the Indian Ocean Islands Foundation, still fairly new, but we're very ambitious. This is kind of where we are trying to address resiliency. So in our programmatic range of actions, we are looking to break that vicious cycle, mostly by focusing on how we can help communities depend on a larger array of resources, whether it's human, whether it's material, knowledge, or even financial, from within the area they are at. Now, we know when there are at-risk communities and disasters happen of any sort, there's very quick and very rapid supply of resources coming in. But that supply is usually reactionary, meaning it happens after the event. What we are hoping to do and working on is providing those resources ahead of any disaster happening. So how can we have a low-income person living on the coastline, dependent on gleaning to provide food for the family, dependent on fishing when the weather is good? What other resources can they have, can they tap into to increase their ability to sustain strong effects, be it from climate, being from man-made disasters, or from any other crisis, even major economic crisis that may affect them? So some of the aspects we're looking to put emphasis on is looking at how to put added value on traditional practices, local knowledge, rather than those being short-term, once-in-a-while activities reserved to a generation that is, dates from parents, grandparents' time. How can we put added value on them for tomorrow so those same communities not only retain their knowledge, but can pass on those resiliency and adapted mechanisms of survival to others and make it economically viable for themselves? So that's kind of the case study I wanted to present today for this particular topic. Feel free to reach out. I will post a LinkedIn link to myself and to the foundation in the chat. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for showing the challenges, but also what could and should be done. So now over to our final speaker, Julian Baez Benitez from the World Meteorological Organization.
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to to do this presentation on behalf of WMO. I'm Julian Baez from the World Meteorological Organization. I'm the regional director of this organization for the Americas. I don't know if you can see my presentation now.
Yep, please click on slideshow.
Okay. Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to give a little bit background about the World Meteorological Organization because it's a global UN organization, started very long time as an international meteorological organization in 1873. But after, in 1950, IMO becomes to World Meteorological Organization, and after since 1951, it becomes a specialized agencies of UN for topics related to weather, climate, and water. It's composed by 130 members, 187 states and 6 territories, represented by the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services of the countries. Our main mandate is to promote the cooperation between countries in order to exchange data for atmospheric variables in order to produce the weather forecast, climate forecast, and hydrological forecast as well. At global level, at regional level, at a national level, through the National Met Services and through the specialized centers distributed around the world in our member countries. We have headquarters in Geneva, but several regional offices. I'm representing the regional office for the Americas, based in Paraguay, but we have another one in Africa, another one in Singapore, and for Europe is based in Geneva. Our main, as I mentioned, mandate is related to the coordination, the support capacity building of the National Met Services in order to provide the better service. And in that, for that end, you can see the services value change, starting with observation around the world using different technologies, satellites, surface-based station, marine observation, etc. Numerical models, but also these numerical models is translated to forecast, and finally using for release this forecast, and particularly when you have extreme weather events or climate events, to support the early warning system and also to support the sustainable development goal. We do this work through the regular budget provided by the country members, but also using different funding mechanisms through projects. We have, I mentioned in this slide, 2 main projects, one related to cruise, climate risk early warning system, funded by several countries from Europe, other countries around the world, including international financial agencies, covering especially the small island developing states, and also the least developing countries around the world. But in the case of cruise, I can mention that we have several initiatives in the Southeast Pacific but also in the Caribbean region. It was mentioned by my colleagues, my previous speaker, we are promoting a key of our work right now is the implementation of early warning system for all. Before this, we have in the last part of the slide, the current map for GMAS, the Global Alert System Protocol that we are implemented and ongoing working with the collaboration of our member states. Also, we have initiatives related to the improvement of the observation facility through the soft mechanism. I think, and I put this slide because one of the main capacity and in the regions, particularly in the Caribbean region, is the Hurricane Committee. This committee is composed by several, all the national med services of the Caribbean region and Central American region as well. We have several other Hurricane Committee in the Pacific side, in the Indian side, and also in the south part of the Pacific in the Australia country. But I mentioned this particular of the Caribbean because I think it's a very good example on the preparation for extreme events, for hurricanes in the region, protecting life and livelihoods in the region. This is a very good example of how WMO coordinate the work of those regional institutions. I put also another project we cover around the world, but I put in particular the implementation in 6 countries. This is called a flash flood guidance system. It's another tool to support the early warning system in the countries. It was implemented in as you see, is operational in several countries, 6 countries: Belize, Dominican Republic, Fiji, Haiti, Papua New Guinea, Saint Lucia, and Timor-Leste, and is programmed to implement it in another seats like Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Mauritius, Samoa, Tonga, and Vanuatu. This is another tool that is coordinated by WMO, but implemented by the country members and supported by, in this case, USAID funds. Related to the multi-hazard early warning system, we are very strong, committed with the implementation of this kind of adaptation measured in countries, following the 4 pillars. The most recently is the early warning for all, which is implemented jointly with these 4 organizations, 3 of them UN organizations, leading each pillars. For example, the pillar 1 related to the knowledge of the risk is leading by UNDRR. The monitoring and the forecasting is leading by WMO. The communication is leading by the ITU, and the response and recovery is leading by IFRC. This initiative is currently ongoing.
And Jorge, if I could ask you to please wrap up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. For the wrap up, just to mention that we are an organization that coordinate mainly the effort from the countries in order to produce better forecasts and climate and hydrology forecasts. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, and really exciting to see these initiatives. We have some fabulous questions in the Q&A, one of which is rather general. What exactly does island resilience mean to you? And Camila gave us a wonderful answer during that first presentation. Is there another speaker who might want to give us a few sentences? What does island resilience exactly mean to you? Who would like to jump in? Or Camila, then, do you maybe want to elaborate on your answer?
I think Priscilla wanted to go in, and maybe I can add something.
Okay, please, Priscilla, go ahead.
Well, I was going to jump in if Camila wasn't. It's easy to say that resilience is about being able, traditional definition in terms of being able to maintain a steady state. But it's more than that. It's about being able to maintain a steady state for one's well-being. So whether it's at individual level, at community level, at regional level. So the definitions of resiliency, to me, is always with respect to a particular context. And I think that context matters a lot more, because those are where the drivers and the support system that confer resiliency will be. My 2 cents.
Camila, any responses to that?
Yeah, no, I echo Priscilla's thoughts. And I think in terms of the context, I mean, we could talk about social, economic resilience, right? And, a lot of people talk about bouncing back from disaster, but I'd like to also look at it from bounce back and forward, right? And there's an ability to withstand, prepare and recover from. And we've seen it even from lack of resources, under resources, even in our in many of our communities and islands, but they still have the ability to innovate internally and figure out how to make sure that the communities continue to operate even with the different disruptions. So yeah, I echo that, but I definitely don't like to get into bounce back, but really like to ensure that we move forward with that.
Wonderful, so helpful. Alexandra, we have a question directly to you. What are the preliminary lessons learned by Lalepa Island, especially considering what you would need to know before replication and scaling up?
So yes, no, the lesson learned from the implementation of the Power Blocks project in Lalepa Island was that increased income generation is really the trigger for scaling up such systems. And this is, of course, a process which takes time. And we cannot, the system was implemented approximately 2 years ago. So the process of generating new income activities is still ongoing. But this did not stop us to, we continued the application of or implementation of this Power Block systems in other geographies. It did not stop us to replicate the solution. So in fact, we implemented the technology solution also in Lao PDR, in a similar low-income community where the technology allowed the community to grow with this new income generating activities, which were possible because of the electricity and because of the installation of these power systems. So it was a very similar context, and the community had also very limited income generation, but because of the electricity provided, even if at small scale from these power block systems, new initiatives were identified, and they are slowly starting to roll out these new initiatives. But I think there was also the question about the link to the Doha Program of Action, which, I mean, I would say the only link here is that these power block systems leverage the power of science, technology, innovation. It's a really innovative new system because it is so easily stackable, as I mentioned already in my presentation. And but the project was not implemented by the Climate Action Center of Excellence, but by a program funded by UNDP. And this was supported in my previous role as climate technical advisor in UNDP. But in my current role in the center, we are working on similar solutions, and we are currently exploring the role of carbon finance to provide subsidies to implement these systems. Of course, it is not an easy or a simple solution because, as already mentioned, energy generation, electricity consumption, and therefore the replacement of, even if it is an off-grid community and it is not a real replacement of fossil fuels, but it could be calculated against it, is difficult because of the low consumption. So even if we compare it with this theoretical consumption of fossil fuels, it would still be low. And this is why emission reductions that are generated through such solutions are also low. And revenues generated through carbon finance cannot really pay for the installation of such systems. But the key challenge...
That's very helpful,
Yeah.
thank you. And I think also addresses the other question, what challenges are there in implementing power blocks? We probably have time for just one more, and this I think is directly to Julian. It comes from Jamaica, where they say we have gullies that contain stormwater, but there have also been some high tide storm surge events from the sea. We have not been properly prepared. What kind of early warning systems can be effective for this specific event? Julian, any thoughts?
I think that I read the question because I can't hear you very well. My internet connection is not very good. But I think the best answer is to improve the forecast of the storm surge. For that, you did a better observation of the not only for the storm but also the ocean with improved models and the participation also of the civil protection to provide the right information in the proper time. I think that is the key in this case to the effectiveness of the alert system, the alert system.
It's very helpful. And thank you to those who are continuing to submit questions. Please do not hesitate to contact anyone on this panel or Island Innovation because it should not stop here. This should be continuing exchange. And to facilitate that, I will give our panelists one final sentence each to try and sum up and advise where we should go from here. Camila, would you be okay to start, please?
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you all again. And I think one of the key points that I want to emphasize here is to establish relationships and the partnerships that I talked about, the public-private partnerships early and often and pre-disaster during blue sky periods, and not when disaster strikes, trying to figure out, who's on the table and really know who are the people that you should connect with. And I know it sounds easier said than done, and actually know who you want to engage. And then the last point is to continue to plan with and not for the community. Always think about that, because sometimes we think that the communities need X, Y, Z, but if you don't, then maybe the solution is not really what's going to work for them. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you all so much for the opportunity and look forward to connecting.
So wonderful. Alexandra, please.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate and for the invitation. And yeah, if I have just one sentence, I would say that resilient energy systems are really a critical part of disaster preparedness and recovery efforts. But most importantly, such sustainable energy solutions will not only enhance disaster recovery efforts, but also promote economic growth, environmental sustainability, and energy security in the long term. Thank you.
Super and so helpful. Priscilla.
For me, it's about recognizing that island communities are not a monolith. There is strength within islands by building interrelationships between communities, especially towards creating the common good and using that common good to improve resiliency. Thank you.
Excellent, and hopefully we can take that forward. Julian.
Thank you. Thank you for for giving me the opportunity. For me, is the partnership, the improvement of the partnership in order to improve the early warning system, because it's centering people. You need to combine different institutions and convince also the government to invest in infrastructure in order to be more prepared in terms of the monitoring of the hazards and improve the forecast of the hazards and to communicate better. Thank you.
That has been so helpful. And I think given the expertise of the panelists, really shows my thought, which goes back to the title of the session. The key is preparing, which will mean a lot less response and hopefully no recovery, because we will just be there. Rather than disaster by choice, it will be no disaster by choice, demonstrating that no matter what the environment does, no matter how we are changing the environment, we do not need to have disasters, which are not natural. Thank you everyone for being here, and over to Michaela to close. You are muted, Michaela.
Thank you, Ilan, and of course, a huge thank you to all of our speakers for such an insightful discussion on island communities and disasters. For anyone who may have missed it, we announced very exciting news during our opening session yesterday. Island Innovation is partnering with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis to host the second Global Sustainable Island Summit. After this year's experience in Prince Edward Island, Canada, the Caribbean will now take the spotlight. This summit will be held from May 27th to the 29th of 2025, that's next year, and we will be discussing solutions and advancements in sustainable energy. So you can check the chat for more details on a special discount on early bird tickets, and of course, we hope to see a lot of you guys there next year in person. Our next session for today will be How to Power a City, Renewable Energy Documentary Film Screening, and that'll be followed by a Q&A. That's in 2 hours from now, so we hope to see you all then. Thank you, everyone.